is talking about some key writing ideas to keep in mind as you're moving forward in your discussion board post, as you're thinking about revising previous ones, some ideas to look at, and then we're going to dive into the content that we have for this week. There's the general content for the 14th century, and then specifically talking about the text Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Okay, so starting with writing. One of the things that I've noticed, and this is not unusual for this particular time of teaching this class, but it is one of the transition moments between writing about literary texts before and what we're looking for now, is I'm not interested necessarily in how much information you can tell me about the text itself. Therefore, only use the parts of the material that are helpful for you to make an argument. So what's an argument? An argument is not two people, going back and forth about a disagreement. In writing, an argument is a point that you want to prove, that you're going to prove with evidence from the text. And so it is the idea that you have overall. And so I put it at the bottom here because these things lead to this, but let's start by talking in here. You've got one idea you want to prove. So as you read the prompt, your mind is going to go to an idea almost immediately. Start there and think about how that you can prove it. And there's the way to do it. One, show rather than tell. In other words, let the text speak for itself. Use quotes from the text rather than as much summary in order to accomplish this. So oftentimes when it comes to writing about these texts, you might feel the need to tell me everything you need to know about it, as though I've got some measure of assessment that says, okay, if they represent this much knowledge about Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, then they get an A. Well, that's not how this works. I am not interested in knowing every little piece and portion of a specific topic in the text. What I want you to view these prompts as is an opportunity to dig deeply into a specific idea. So I want you to summarize less. You don't need to tell me about all of the things going on in the text. If you're trying to do a post in 300 words, there's no way you can cover this topic in particular with Sir Gawain in 300 words. So what do you want to do? Find one specific topic and write to prove that point. Now you might find different examples throughout the text and be able to draw it together, but the idea is you want to show rather than tell, quote more, and summarize less to prove a specific point. The best way to do this, in my opinion, is by using the SEAL method, which is linked on Blackboard. So the S of SEAL, state your argument. What is the thing you're trying to prove? And then illustrate it with those examples and explanations. The E of that is the explanations. So really working to stay in control of the information by saying from the outset what you're going to do, and then using quotes to support it and explaining how those quotes prove that point. When you quote a text, it pulls you deeper because you're saying, here's what the text says, here's my explanation of it, versus here's my summary of what, or my paraphrase of what the text says and what I think about it. You can even hear the sort of looseness in the language there versus the very specific argument or idea and response. That's what we're looking for in academic writing. And you're going to see me reference this again and again and again in these comments of staying in control of your information, show rather than tell, and quoting more and summarizing less. I am not interested, and at this point, academic writing is no longer interested in just general summaries of the ideas. We want to see specific things, and this type of writing is exactly what you will be doing in different contexts as you move on from this class. So in your 3,000, 4,000 level classes, or in graduate school and other things, summarizing is appropriate in some places, but what people are going to want you to do is for you to prove a specific point. So in writing, keep that in mind. Going to prove a point, show rather than tell, quote more, summarize less, and I will keep encouraging that in your own writing. We'll point back to the example post on Blackboard. They're linked on in the For This Week section. It will give you information about how to do this effectively. Okay, so Moving on to talking about the 14th century, and there's a big group of big chunk of text there. That's all really good for you to understand what exactly is going on in the world during this time, because there's a relationship between the literature of the time and what is happening in the world. And two specific things I want you to think about as you're working through that information is, how do these people view class distinctions, right? So this is something that is, I think, particularly relevant in our culture today, though the American ideal is built on the idea that there aren't class distinctions, that people can build their way up and everybody has equal opportunity. Well, that's not true. We know that's not true. But here, even back then, that sort of idea wasn't around as prevalent. The idea was, if you were born into a peasant class or to a wealthy class, that's kind of where you stayed. And you're starting to see different movements that represent changes in that dynamic, especially as prompted by major events like famine, weather patterns, lots of people dying. People get frustrated when there's no food, and the wealthy are continuing to eat, but the poor don't have access to it. And so you see these various uprisings. One thing to think about in terms of these class distinctions as you're reading through it, make sure that you understand that even the historical writers have a lens through which they're viewing stuff. So at this point, when we're looking at something historically, there's no such thing as the pure, unadulterated truth. It's always interpreted through the lens of someone. And it's important for us to look at that person and say, what's their game? Like, where are they coming from? How are the wealthy going to view a peasant uprising? Well, they might view it as empowering, or they might view it as completely ridiculous. And peasants might have a different view of it as well. They may say, yes, we're finally rising, or do not upset the apple cart because we might lose everything we have. So be willing to question, and that doesn't make them wrong or right. It just means that it's important for us to understand that is the lens through which we see stuff. And also going on during this time, you've got sort of cataclysmic events, the plague being the most representative example of one. So you think about how many people, like a third of Europe dying, and in the cities, sometimes half of the people within a city are dying. That changes everything, right? It changes availability of food, availability of workforce, where people are just, if you're walking out the door, you're in constant fear that you too will die as your friends and family members die around you. And a lot of the ways that this is interpreted are through religious lenses, and specifically Christianity, as we've sinned, we have incurred the wrath of God because of our sinfulness, and that's what the plague has done. And so you'll see narratives that flow through that. So think about how that affects the way that these people view these cataclysmic events. It's different now, right? Christianity is not as prevalent in our culture as it would have been in 14th century England, or any religious movement for that matter, is not as prevalent now as it was then. And so if something like that were to happen now, we view it through a completely different lens than they would do then. So be willing to put yourself into the shoes of those people to see how they're viewing things and understanding why they would write the text that they write. And coming out of these events as judgment, when you're losing so many people, a lot of times we will look to an idealized past, and we'll say things like, man, back in this day, in this legendary time, this is when we were truly who we needed to be. You hear about the golden age, or back in the past when things were better. Even a political campaign can be built on that, right? Make America great again, right? That prompts the question, that idea of it used to be great, it's not great now, got to get great again, right? And I think that is a driving political idea for a lot of people. But you hear the nostalgia in that post and saying, man, back in the day, we knew certain things, right? That was better. And that drives a lot of people, especially in times of struggle, to look to an idealized past. And this text comes out of that idealized past. All of this King Arthur material this is when England was truly the place of honor and all these other things. And so that's why you have this kind of idealized version of life. And you'll see it play out in this particular text. So just a note about the text itself. In your edition there, you've got a facing page translation, or a facing column translation, which means that the Middle English is on the left and the translation is on the right. Now, I'm only asking you to read the right, but it would be good to look at the stuff on the left as well to make sure you're catching some of the rhyme schemes and other stuff that are lost in translation. But here are some of the ideas to keep an eye on. Honor and chivalry is throughout this text. It happens when the knight approaches King Arthur's court. It happens when Sir Gawain steps in. It happens when he goes to Bertilac's house. It happens when he goes to the Green Knight. It happens with his interactions with the woman there. So it's all throughout the text. But notice how it focus is a little bit different than Beowulf. Beowulf is a charge into the room, sword drawn, let's do this type person. That doesn't seem to be the world that we're living in here, right? The Green Knight is a supernatural villain, right? Look at the description of him. But he is not malformed and a son of Cain and cursed by God as Grendel and Grendel's mother, or even a restless evil driven by greed like the dragon. The Green Knight, and this is the idea of this sort of Christmas holiday game, he is a villain, but he's not quite villainous, right? It seems like he has different intentions in mind. Same with honor and chivalry. Sir Gawain is not the hero going to ride into the sunset like he has, and who's definitely going to win, right? He has his own flaws and struggles as well. And think about how the text, especially at the end, interprets these flaws. That Gawain is more of a three-dimensional character than Beowulf is. Gawain has struggles. He has things that he fights throughout the text, and I'm curious to see how you see this idea changing from the way it was defined in Beowulf to this type of warrior knight story, and how the honor code is translated and how we should view this character. I mentioned the Green Knight as a villain already. But look at how he is formed. Look at what he says, how he's described. Grendel was defined as malformed. The text of Sir Gawain talks about how beautiful the Green Knight is. So keep that in mind as you're working through this. Christianity, again, throughout this text, it's a heavy cultural influence in perhaps even more specific ways than Beowulf was. And so Beowulf, as we talked about, is a Christian interpreting a pagan text for his audience. Gawain comes out of the culture of Christianity. And so you have some more direct language there that makes that connection more explicit. So I'm interested to, I started with this topic to begin with because it translated from here, but so I'm interested to see what you think about this text. And these are some specific things to look for. I'm pointing them to you so that you can take the written notes that I've given you, and all of what I'm saying comes from those written notes. Read those closely to unpack these ideas a bit more, and then take a look at the text, write according to some of the things I've given you today. I think you'll really enjoy this text as we move forward, and please let me know if you have any questions or concerns.